South Africa will have a woman-led judiciary when Mandisa Maya takes over as Chief Justice on the 1st of September. She takes over from incumbent Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, who also chaired the inquiry looking into the allegations of state capture. Judges Matter researcher Mbekezeli Benjamin joins me now to reflect on that a little bit. Mbekezeli, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on. It was always a debated issue whether or not the Chief Justice should come into that space, considering his age and the fact that he will only be there for a very short period of time. Were those concerns justified?
Good evening, Mr. Mbekezeli, and good evening to the viewers. Yes, the concerns were justified because when you look at the work and the job of the Chief Justice versus the time at which you can really put plans in place and implement those plans, it was a bit of a conundrum, because a lot of the work that one needs to do as Chief Justice requires a long-term vision, and you make plans that you'll implement over a number of years in order to achieve that vision. And some of the institutions, for example, that you're in charge of are really strong institutions. Some of them are very big institutions when you consider that the Judicial Service Commission, for example, has about 23 members. And to get buy-in on some of the things, you do need to do a lot of work there. And even the institution of the judiciary itself requires a lot of time for you to work on. So 2 years was never going to be enough. And so it was one of the discounting factors against Justice Zondo becoming Chief Justice.
However, he did come into that position, but many would argue that up until maybe around the time he was chairing the Commission of Inquiry into state capture, not much would have been really known about the Chief Justice, or at least the spotlight was not on him. You might have certainly known about the Chief Justice, and you can certainly share some of the things that he could have done before his rise to sit on that particular chair, to chair that commission.
Yes, so Justice Zondo has been a judge since 1997. And initially, he was a judge of the Labour Court, and he served in that role from 1997 until the end of 2011. So that is really almost 20 years in the position. And he was also the judge president, of course, of the Labour Court. And during that time, he was quite instrumental, really, in setting in place some of the key principles of labour law. One example that comes to mind is a Section 197 procedure. So what happens to the employees of a company when it is sold to another person? That kind of principle he's spent a lot of time thinking about and writing about as a judge of the Labour Court. And it was only in 2012 when he became a Justice of the Constitutional Court. And even there, he focused a lot on labour law, but again, behind the scenes. And it's not a bad thing, actually, if judges are not known publicly or don't have a public profile. We expect really their work to speak for them. And so for all of those years, while he was a Justice of the Constitutional Court, and even when he became Deputy Chief Justice in 2017, he was behind the scenes. And you're quite right to say, after the State Capture Commission from 2018, that's when he started to be in the public limelight.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, I think the intention of your article was really to reflect on his last 24 months, but also just the impact that he's had and the legacy that he's leaving behind, one of which is the state capture inquiry. There are two ways that people are interpreting his work. Either he was effective in carrying out the task, or others are saying, no, he became a political activist and he didn't really do much in that particular chair. What is your analysis of what he did as the chair of the inquiry?
Well, precisely because of how tough the task was, is why there are really two diametric positions on this. And there's argument either way. Some people viewed him as being some sort of political activist, and others really commend him for the role. But I think a more fair assessment of his time is really when you look at the impact of the state capture inquiry. At the time, we all were aware that the big state-owned companies had been taken over. There was massive stealing at those companies, but we didn't really understand the depth of that stealing. It was the public protector, of course, who did that initial investigation and handed it over to a commission of inquiry. So for the 4 years in which Justice Zondo chaired the State Capture Commission, he was able to find out some of the shocking facts behind state capture and how those state-owned companies were taken over, how government departments the mandates were infiltrated. Some of that work really came at I'm sure, a cost to him personally, I imagine, because it came at quite significant criticism, right? Because he was touching political players in our system, and so it would have attracted some level of criticism. But even if we look at the financial benefits that came from the State Capture Commission, for example, we were able to get back some of the money that was lost. Some of the companies, like McKinsey, paid back the billions that were stolen through their activities. Other companies like SAP from Germany also paid back some of the money. So there'll be many opportunities for us to analyze the impacts of the State Capture Commission. But for an individual, a South African who stepped up and was able to do that work, I think we can give him credit for. But when we look at the impact, though, of his role at the State Capture Commission and the judiciary, I think that he can legitimately be criticized at some points. There were times where you couldn't draw a line between his role as the head of the judiciary and the head of the State Capture Commission. And that wasn't really good because, for example, there was a talk that he gave towards the end of last year where he was criticizing Parliament and criticizing the extent of the implementation of the State Capture recommendations. That brought him into conflict with Parliament, which is a key institution that is supposed to have good relations with the judiciary. And one doesn't really need that kind of drama between the head of the judiciary and the head of Parliament. So that, I think, was one of the examples where we saw his role on the State Capture Commission actually harmed the judiciary as an institution.
One of the other things that he would have done is to institute some reforms, particularly in the process of the Judicial Service Commission in interviewing potential judges. You're saying that is a feather on his cap. Do you think that those are reforms that have dramatically improved that process, and certainly reforms that are going to be there for a while? Even those who come after him are going to follow on that footstep.
Yes, I think we can also give him credit for the reforms he instituted at the Judicial Service Commission. You'll recall that when he came on as acting Chief Justice in 2021, the Judicial Service Commission, I think, reached its lowest level in probably its history. It was facing a court order that said that it must rerun interviews, and it was really criticized for the way in which those interviews were chaotic, they were disrespectful to the candidates, and really public confidence in the JSC had declined. And one of the things that he did when he came on in October of 2021 was to bring together all the commissioners at what they called a workshop. It happened on the weekend before the interview started, and they were able to bash out some of the issues, some of the problems in the JSC, and there was a shared commitment towards doing better. And from then onwards, we did see an improvement. That improvement continued until 2023, where we saw the JSC officially adopt written criteria for how it conducts its interviews. And that has always been one of the key criticisms and the key weaknesses in the JSC, that you have all of these interviews, but they don't seem to be guided by anything other than just the whims or the passions of the people inside the room. So it was really important to have those in place. And since then, we've seen a marked improvement, really a dramatic improvement in the quality of the interviews, the quality of the questions, how respectful they are to the candidates. And I think the public image of the JSC has improved. And so that is also something that the next Chief Justice can take over and continue on the path, because the project is still not complete. We are still right now needing a code of conduct for commissioners, which is really important to enforce the standards of ethics for the members of the Judicial Service Commission.
So let's talk about some of the things that he said he would want to do in 24 months. I'm sure you would have looked at those lofty priorities and thought in 24 months, there's no way you're going to achieve that. And I'm sure you were proven right, because he didn't quite achieve those. One of those is, of course, implementing the full administrative independence of the judiciary, addressing some of the problems that the Constitutional Court would be facing, like enforcing performance standards and ensuring that judgments, for example, are delivered on time. I mean, would you score him anywhere there?
Yes. So on those three priorities, there were some that he failed. There were some that he did succeed in. So on the administrative independence of the judiciary, it certainly was put on the top of the priority list, and it has been a discussion. In fact, the judges' conference that happened in December of 2023, it was the main topic of discussion. The administration of the courts, and in fact, one of the key resolutions from that conference was that administration of the courts must be in the full hands of the judges. So in terms of raising the topic, I think he has helped, but I don't think that he has gone much further than when he started 24 months ago. Similarly, with the Constitutional Court, the performance of the Constitutional Court has declined, partly because of the amendment to the Constitution in 2013 that expanded the work or the jurisdiction of the court. And so it was really battling with the amount or the volume of work. And so he came up with some idea of bringing in retired judges. He was criticized for that, and he withdrew that proposal. And also he made another proposal of bringing in non-judges to act on the Constitutional Court. We saw a law professor make themselves available. We saw two senior advocates also come on. That was a way of trying to get the Constitutional Court to work properly, to get a full complement of judges. And so that was something that I think he didn't quite succeed in it. And in fact, even now, the Constitutional Court still has a vacancy and will continue to have that vacancy at least until April of 2025. On the last point on holding judges accountable to perform their work, we saw two tribunals that looked into judges delivering their judgments. One of those tribunals has concluded, and the judge in the tribunal was found guilty of misconduct. It was not the worst form of misconduct, so she won't be impeached, but she certainly will get a sanction, and she will have to be given some remedial steps to improve her performance. And even now, there's one pending one against, I think, the Judge Maumela, was the presiding judge in the Senzo Meyiwa trial. That was something that was unheard of, and some, even within the judiciary, were shocked that a judge can be put on a tribunal for failing to deliver judgment. So that really came during Chief Justice Zondo's term, and I think there we can give him at least 50% for half of the work that he did there.
The question of course, convincing many that the judiciary must be fully in charge of the nearly 3 billion rands court administration budget is one that it certainly did not achieve. But is that something that is worth pursuing?
Yes, it is something that is worth pursuing, because look, the current situation that we have is, it sort of is in the middle of a reform, because these reforms actually started with Chief Justice Charles Carson and Chief Justice Langa all the way in 2009 and even going back. So this administration of the courts being under the control of judges has been something that has been in the works for at least 15 years. Chief Justice Mogoeng went some way in establishing the Office of the Chief Justice, which is a national government department that administers the court, but it's still halfway to what the original vision was. And so it is still worth pursuing. The next coming Chief Justice, Justice Maya, has put that as one of her priorities. She wants to see that done. And even last week, we heard from the new Minister of Justice, Ms. Thembi Simelane, rather. She, in her budget speech in Parliament, she mentioned that it is something that she will be working towards, seeing both the judges and magistrates fall under one administrative department with a single budget to run all the courts in the country. So that it is still in the works, and I think Chief Justice Zondo might have left it halfway, but I think it will continue into the future.
One of the things, as we wrap up, that many would have been taken aback by was the Chief Justice at some point holding a media conference. I mean, you've mentioned his public engagements and talks, and his endeavor to try and clean up the image of the judiciary by directly engaging members of the media, holding press conferences and so on and so forth, was highly criticized. Was that helpful? As many people said, no, some of these views that the judge is advancing, he must advance them through his judgments. You can't be holding a press conference and coming to try and defend the judiciary.
Well, there are two ways of looking at it. There was one press conference that he held after Minister Lindiwe Sisulu was criticizing the judiciary, calling black judges house Negroes and using that kind of language. And the Chief Justice came out quite strongly to condemn those words and to speak out in defense of the judiciary. There was also a time when there were allegations of judicial capture that were made, and they were not substantiated with evidence. And again, he came out quite strongly to defend the integrity of the judiciary. And I think a lot of people within and outside of the judiciary were encouraged by that, to see the Chief Justice leading from the front and defending the integrity of the judiciary. But there were points at which I think Chief Justice Zondo went overboard in the number of engagements that he had and on the issues that he had. And in fact, in one interview on Newzroom, he was quite candid about a pending trial against former President Zuma, and how that trial is happening and what might be the likely outcome. It was completely inappropriate for someone who is the head of the judiciary, because now he was speaking about live issues that were before the courts. And so I think that it was a little bit overboard, but there certainly was a need at specific points where he needed to come out, and that was really welcome.
Mbekezeli Benjamin, we appreciate your time as always. Thanks so much for coming on and your reflection there this evening, researcher at the Judges Matter.